Good morning. That was a little soft. I'm used to hearing back from my audience. Good morning. Okay, we're going to change the dynamics in the room. It's indeed a pleasure to be here, and I want to recognize Professor Kitila, and whom I don't know if he's still in the audience, because he gave for putting up this impressive historic event. I want to extend my gratitude to the organizers of the Minority Interest Directors Forum, first of all, for the invitation to be part of this historic event. For me, it's a historic event, and I'll get into why it's so historic for me. Specifically, I would like to recognize the overall construct of the forum, which is designed to explore proven concepts, practices, leading indicators on how to optimize institutional structures, not to teach you anything new, for enhanced organizational performance is the way we are going. This very topic is dear to my heart, based on the roles and responsibilities I've had for the past 10 years, through the logistics of doing space science and exploration. The thrust of the forum, from the way I was educated, I got a crash course on the forum, is consistent with the critical needs of organizations around the world, and in fact, countries around the world. I was amazed yesterday when the whole arrangement, the government-private sector arrangement, minority shares, that whole looks like a maze to me, M-A-Z-E. But finally, I got it, and it's really a model that the rest of the African countries, not just in this region, can learn from Tanzania. It is also in line with the drive to equip leaders, CEOs, directors, with relevant tools, knowledge, and skills to succeed, because our world needs leaders of courage today to provide guidance and what I call a measured level of stability and direction in times of uncertainty, which we have a lot in the world. Thank you for bringing the light down. And as a matter of principle, a construct that brings directors, CEOs, and leaders of various stakeholder groups to reflect, to motivate, to learn, educate, and share insights and ideas for enhanced performance is worth celebrating, really. We have gathered at an institute, and yesterday I alluded to this. It's very important to me, so I will touch on it again. We have gathered at an institute named after a great son of Africa and a giant statesman of his time. His very title, Mwalimu exudes knowledge, represents the pursuit of knowledge and the use of knowledge to innovate solutions and drive progress. And as Chief Knowledge Officer, you can see the connection, why that will talk to me personally. As a son of Africa, I am honored to walk on this campus, taking it all in yesterday. And I would like to say hello to the principals and those that have been taking care of this facility. Thank you. Thank you. Scholars and academics and leaders need to visit this place to learn a few things about what I refer often to as intellectual humility. Friends, true knowledge and the ethical use of knowledge is critical in the world today. The confluence of artificial intelligence, cyber development, geopolitics, which we'll be talking about later on, have resulted in unprecedented uncertainties that require careful use of specialized knowledge, including the adoption of technology to inform, to influence, and to drive institutional performance, or what we are calling the theme, enhanced performance. Before I proceed, there's a full disclosure that I have to make. Please note, I'm doing this presentation on my own behalf as a proud son of Africa and not in my official role as a NASA employee. I hope that is clear. Who am I to provide insights? Let me get this going a little bit, and I think you can see the disclaimer. Who am I to provide insights on concepts, practices, literally to motivate organizations, CEOs, directors, members of government that already excel from the statistics, the data that we were just being given, going over? Who am I? Before I get into my prepared comments, and I have quite a few, traditions across this vast continent of Africa instructs me to introduce myself to you. And so who am I to get in front of such an accomplished group to give you insights and some tips, basically, on enhanced performance? Who is Moses Adoko, you may ask? For context, Africa is the continent of my birth, as my clearly accentuated accent on the Queen's language, and I think now I have to say the King's language, gives it out. I grew up literally on the African plains, and I always insist that the biosignatures of organic matter found exclusively, oh yeah, there is something like that, found exclusively in Africa, specifically in the Nile Valley, are in my veins and drives my spirits and my disposition in everything I do. Africa talks to me each time I breathe, no matter where I am in the world. And so I can help design, build, launch, and operate spacecraft that flies in the very face of our sun, or chase asteroids millions of miles away, and this is true. Land on the asteroids, contain samples, and come right back, and I'll still remain an African with a kinky hair, for which I'm very proud of, as you can see. For our discussion today, I have decided to give you a ride on a rocket. So we are going to be all over the map, but eventually, trust me, we will land safely. I have decided to talk about the value of systematic development of organizational strategy, including the role of technology in decision-making, performance, or of the above. It is also my objective to highlight the interdependency. This is important, and I'll go slow on this when I get to that slide. The interdependency of mission, strategy, programs, and projects, and how technology adoption and decision-making can impact what we are interested in, which is measurable performance outcomes. I intend to share a couple of tips regarding what we know about leadership. And so I hope upon the completion of my talk, which is going to be at times slow, at times fast, all over the map, but we have a direction. We're on a trajectory, getting somewhere. I hope by the end you'll be able to leverage one vector of interest to influence your leadership journey and continue doing what you're doing on behalf of this great country. I have had the opportunity in the course of my leadership journey to work and engage diverse organizational cultures, people around the world. These different environments and cultures over the course of time have influenced my perspectives on leadership, teamwork, and community. For example, in these different organizational environments, I have learned the value of reflection and calm disposition as powerful attributes for effective leadership. These opportunities as well have also convinced me about the power of teamwork, collaboration. In fact, collaboration, I prefer to call it the utility of collaboration. That's what collaboration is. Whether it's between government and the private sector, it's still a utility that we know how to leverage and employ. It is almost an imperative for leadership anywhere within any enterprise to know how to leverage collaboration and partnership as a utility. It's a skill set typically you don't get from a university, but it's relevant. My 25 years of work at NASA have equipped me with the building blocks for leadership courage, and I'll touch on this, what do I mean by that, and inspiration in times of uncertainty, and most importantly, when we find ourselves in the universe of unknowns, the universe of unknowns. So it is fair to say that I've been shaped and influenced by different leadership constructs. Who am I? Let me give you a little bit of who I am. I often get this question. At NASA, I've served in various capacities. I have learned that at times leadership will find you. I have also discovered that at times you will be thrusted, literally thrusted, T-H-R-U-S-T-E-D, thrusted into leadership. And in some instances, you'll be fortunate enough, very fortunate enough, to be identified as an emerging leader and then be offered training, guidance, and hands-on experience before assuming the roles of responsibility as a leader. In all of these scenarios, my advice is always be ready, because the answer, I'm not ready to be a leader, won't cut it. So be ready. You are not allowed to say, I am not ready. Before I delve into the subject of our conversation, let me share a bit of my professional background. I think you can see some of them. As passion alone is not enough to offer insights on technical subjects, more so for an accomplished August audience like this. You need more than just passion. At NASA, as part of my Chief Knowledge Management or Chief Knowledge Officer functions, I'm also the administrator of a NASA Goddard Senior Fellows Program. Let me get into this. I think this captures a very snapshot. This program, Senior Fellows Program, in addition to my knowledge officer role, is a scientific and a technical advisory board that advises NASA Goddard leadership in areas of research, science, technology, complex systems, innovation, including activities that we consider, we often refer to as early stage research, with potentially radical but with high reward research outcomes. And those research outcomes could have very dramatic long-term impact on science, engineering, basically industry, and how we live. As already pointed out, I lecture at Columbia, George Washington University. I serve on a couple of boards, and so please forgive me if I get confused in the course of our talk, my talk, and shift into a lecturing or professorial mode. I just can't help it. It's muscle memory. So I'm not here to lecture you, but if you find me instead of engaging you, forgive me. It just comes naturally. Let's watch a short video that I put together, and I think this slide's out there. You can see some of the cool things. I like this slide, pointing this out. This is NASA a couple of years ago deciding to celebrate what I've helped to do, so they put me up there. I cannot do that. You can see the media, and it breaks my heart when I have to do this, but it's expected. In this case, they did this, putting it out there. They can do that, but I cannot do it. A few things. I just want to play this to set it kind of for us to get into some more. I'm just going to proceed, and then I'll come back to this video shortly. It is worth noting that the first science, I'm going to perhaps get some questions right away, but let me say this. It is worth noting that the first science and technology projects accomplished by humans were executed on the African continent. This land, Africa, is the birthplace of science and technology, though rudimentary, I must add quickly. Space science and exploration started on this continent by humans as our early ancestors wondered about the mysteries of the stars, the suns, and the planets. They even learned to give names to some of these celestial bodies and the cosmic events that they observed in the African night, which actually it's very perfect for doing space observations. The early Africans invented cultural practices that recognized and celebrated the wonders of our universe. Sometimes, as children of this generation, we don't even pause to ask questions about some of the rituals, so-called rituals, dances, and belief systems that we have. A lot of these things point to observations that were carried out by the early Africans. Some of those cultural practices are still with us today, except we have lost their true origin meaning, and evolution. The sources of these practices and observance are incredible. Africa served and continues to serve as the birthplace of curiosity that drives scientific inquiry. Very important. Knowledge and inventions, as well as the essential materials, oh yes, materials, needed for technology development, always point to Africa. Friends and colleagues, allow me to submit that business growth, scientific inventions, and economic development are human activities that are better facilitated through teams and effective leadership. At NASA, we explore through we interrogate space through four main categories. And we seek to understand our place in the universe. We study the Earth. This is very, very important. When you go to universities, programs of study that we have across academia tend to be very narrow focused, so siloed. At NASA, we study the Earth as a system of systems. In other words, all the complexities associated with planet Earth. We do slice it from that angle. We create models from mathematical concepts and principles to understand how planet Earth functions. And by the way, when we study planet Earth, we begin to also understand some issues facing the planet. Some call it climate change, some call it climate changing. We do know there's something going on, let me put it that way. Talking about applied science, which points, based on some analysis, reduce agricultural yields in specific crop zones that I may touch on as a result of what's going on with planet Earth. Essentially, at NASA, we are at the forefront on the ongoing need for big data, for analysis, climate science. In addition, we are involved in research and exploration activities that respond to questions like, what happened to planet Mars? For those of you that are interested in those basics. What is going on with our sun? And of course, the big question, are we alone? Please do not ask me about the aliens yet. Are we alone? We do get into all of that. And that brings me to this important subject, helio. Often when I speak at universities, they would ask, I'm interested in space science. What's your recommendation? And I always tell those students, this is very fertile. This is the study of our sun. And the science community devoted to studying the sun is a very small group. This is an emerging, but it's becoming increasingly critical domain of science. Why? There is this phenomenon that we are beginning to really get insights and understanding through data. That the sun, actually through some events, the sun has seasons, just as we have El Nino, rainfall, dry season. The sun has seasons. Can you imagine? And we're beginning to understand that. When I talk to little kids, I tell them there's a rainfall season and there's a dry season on the sun. And the sun periodically, there's a cycle that it goes through. Will push up this CME, coronal mass ejections into space, creates this phenomenon that impacts utilities, satellites, power plants, oil and gas pipelines on the surface. This phenomenon is being captured as space weather. It's growing. Utilities are going to invest extensively in this. And so if you're an engineer asking, what should I do? If you're a scientist, you really want to contribute. I always touch on this. It's becoming big. It's nothing fancy being launched into space to become an astronaut. This is actually making a difference right here and contributing to the national economy. Places like, is it Tenasco, the energy in Tanzania? Okay. Believe me, they worry about some of these events. And we have data to back up how some countries in North America a few years ago got hit by some of these CME events that travel all the way to the surface of planet Earth. Space weather, through how we study this, is very, very important. I'm going to go very quickly through this. And something else that I wanted to put out there, I'm here through Friday. And so I have to really touch on a lot of subjects and then get to the real theme, strategy, enhanced performance. But in case someone has questions relating to it and I don't get to it, we will try to have maybe an evening session, if that's okay with the organizers, where I can respond individually to some questions that you may have. But for now, I want to really kind of zoom through this. What you're looking at here is really very, very relevant. For example, in 2022, a coronal mass ejection resulted in 38 commercial satellites being lost. Think about the investment. Think about the communications and assets and capabilities that were coming from those satellites. They were lost. They were lost because what happened? There was this CME, solar plasma, from a CME storm event, and of some sort of the sun. That's the way I explained to the little kids. It caused this denser gas of space, and those denser gases created what we call atmospheric drag on those satellites, causing them to deorbit automatically. And those owners of those commercial satellites were lost. What is the point? The point is, these things are very, very important. I've already talked about our place in the universe, trying to, through astronomy and powerful space-based telescopes, observatories, trying to answer the question, are we alone? And so maybe you're like, okay, tell us now. You're the chief knowledge officer. So I'll hold that off until you ask me. Are we alone? Is there another planet that we can move to? These are all questions that we address. And we've seen things. We have a mission that actually calls Habitable Worlds that is really working this very hard. We're also still trying to understand our planet, and I'm going to talk about something very shortly on this graphic. But we also want to understand what happened to planet Mars. We also want to know our origin. So we go to asteroids and we take samples, just as we do with trying to understand fossils, to see where we came from. And it's very fascinating to see some of the biosignatures and indicators that we are beginning to understand. I want to touch on this here. There's something incredible. Watch this. Pay close attention because your first quiz is coming. I'm going to ask the audience a question. So watch. When Africa comes up, pay attention to what you pick up. And then I'll ask the question. Africa is coming up. Is it? Yeah, I see Australia somewhere there. Pay close attention. What do you pick up? Who wants to be the first? Particularly the central region of Africa. Do you see something picking up? Okay. Fascinating. So what you're observing is Africa through the Congo and the regions, specifically the Amazon. And in the case of Africa, it's the Congo. What you're looking at is the reserve, the Congo Reserve, absorbing all of this carbon dioxide created somewhere else on the surface of planet Earth. So often when I show this, and these are all based on applied space science, what our models are telling us, the way I break this down is if somebody puts carbon dioxide out there, and our Africa, Central Africa, name it, because of the Congo, the forests. And Congo is not the only region of Africa with forests, except in modeling, in statistical analysis, the models simply pull out the Congo. But if we were to expand this, you would actually be able to see the forests of Tanzania, to what level is the forest of Tanzania absorbing carbon dioxide created or literally put out there somewhere else in the world. My argument is there's no free lunch anywhere in the world. And so if carbon dioxide is being used, and we know the damage, it goes on and on and on. If we have these facts, maybe we can negotiate better. We can talk more about this, since this is a closed door. It's fascinating, and we have lots of models along these lines. This is just carbon dioxide. Just to give you an idea. Since I was coming home, I said, okay, this is another one, but I'll skip this for now. This is fascinating. You can see Tanzania. And this is actually from the Japanese. This is not even from NASA. We have NASA models that have actually validated these observations. And what you're looking at, what do you think we are looking at here? You may have, this is a very popular one. You may have seen this. These are also signatures, as you can see. And in the case of Africa, when you look at this section of West Africa and you see all those things going up, you can project. You're looking at the Niger Delta, you know all the stuff going on. And then when you look at this Africa, it's pretty quiet. Again, showing you, arming you with real science that can enhance the discussion and the debate and maybe negotiations. All right. I'm running through the science because I really want to get to the themes. This is very important. When I show this, map this is Lake Chad. Fascinating history surrounding this lake. If you're a student of history, even if you read history books as a hobby, this lake is very historic for the whole of the African continent. Nations of people that migrated from the Nile Valley all the way into some of the nations in today's West Africa used this lake. We also do know there were nations of people that came down to Central and East Africa, also went through Lake Chad. It was a huge lake. When you look at the time sequence, I don't know if you can see it, this lake literally has dried up. Literally. And you can see the mapping. Lots of questions surrounding this. A NASA Landsat spacecraft and some in-situ verification to really what's going on with this lake. And I'll talk about how this lake right here, Kenya, you can look at this. This was in the press a few years ago. Now, when you use space, you talk about data-informed decision-making without saying much. You just project this and you can see what's going on, the change. I think I have another video piece here.
We've crossed the solar system and sent ships to the stars. But we continue to search. We can't help it. A central element of the human future lies far beyond the earth. Some cosmic purpose. Then let us find ourselves a worthy goal.
Now let's get serious now. I'm going to shift very quickly. Into the subject. Let me begin by saying a successful leadership should be constructed, or a successful leadership framework should be constructed and sustained on a clear trajectory of mission, strategy, programs, projects, and performance outcomes. And by the way, responsive programs and projects with measurable outcomes do not occur in a vacuum. Successful organizations, like most of yours, have to ensure that this alignment, I call it a sacred alignment, continue to exist. Mission from strategy, essentially, meaning do not develop strategy without linking it to your mission. Strategy, in turn, is used to formulate specific programs and projects of interest. Most importantly, those projects that often we are excited about need to be based on established measurable values that can be mapped to the enterprise or to the stakeholders in this case. Let me take that again. The measurable goals of programs and projects that we often advance or formulated should be implemented, should be used to implement strategy, and they should be set on clear values for the sponsors. And when I use values, I'm talking about measurable values to the sponsors and the stakeholders. It is the responsibility of leadership, and I don't have to preach this, but I think you know this. As a reminder, it is the responsibility of leadership to ensure that this critical alignment is respected and sustained. And so you have this graphic, I call it the alignment graphic, where you have vision flowing how to inform mission. Let me say a few words about vision. Sometimes we hear the language, shared vision, and the experts on leadership training often will skip through this very quickly. That word, that phrase, that expression, shared vision, it's very, very important. One leader, two leaders, board of directors can have a vision. But they need that work to translate, to have that vision becoming a shared vision. After all, you cannot do it alone. That weakness often exists. And when that weakness is not strengthened, it will flow down into where the vision is a one-man show, one-woman show, one-person show, one stakeholder group show. Let me take that again. We've seen this at NASA. So good leaders will spend time in how they get the vision becoming a shared vision, becoming a collective vision. It's most when you have a group of stakeholders. And there are techniques for doing this. It takes time, but when the vision becomes shared vision, you are in business. That then is used to formulate mission. Never develop a mission concept, and I know a lot about mission success. This is what I breathe. My primary responsibility at NASA is about mission success. Do not do missions in isolation because they are cool to do. Missions have to be informed by the vision, and rightly so. It's a very tight alignment with room, broad framework, set of working. So with room for contingencies. But vision has to inform mission. Of course, shared vision, we go back to that explanation, has to inform mission. Mission then gets flow into strategy. This is where I can spend 2 hours just talking about the importance of strategy. It is very, very important to measure, to know how to set up or formulate executable strategy. The ability to capture, measure, and quantify performance outcomes becomes feasible in an environment where programs are based on well-formulated strategies. Let me take that again. When you talk about measurable performance outcomes, enhanced performance outcomes, it begins with the strategy. And the strategy has to be an executable strategy with targets, clearly mapped targets. Those targets then get used to inform how those programs are themselves set up. And so then it becomes just an alignment and a mapping of some sort to establish the criteria for measuring those programs, the outcomes that we are all interested in. Very clear about vision possesses the ability to translate vision into shared vision. Very, very important. No, don't forget that. Let me make a few suggestions about what we know regarding strategy. Programs and projects implemented without clear alignment to strategy are often targets to be questioned, scrutinized, or even eliminated outright, and rightly so. And that reminds me of an institution I once consulted with that had some of its departments investing in portfolios and instruments that had no prior established kind of an alignment to the institutional strategy. Eventually, the board and the leadership struggled to map those investments to the overall institutional strategy. It was a futile exercise. They couldn't just not do it. And so strategy is important. For those that take their action downstream from strategy, be careful. Your programs are directly informed by strategy. It takes time, expertise, and a multidisciplinary input. Very step-by-step systematic approach to get strategy right. Professional colleagues, stakeholder groups, respect for stakeholder inputs, concerns, irrespective of the size of their shares, is one of the key elements to successful strategy. What did I say? Let me take this again. Irrespective of one group's, the size of their share in a stakeholder group, their inputs are still critical into the formulation of a successful strategy. There should be no ambiguity regarding the expectations and objectives of a project. Projects must and should be based on measurable values to its sponsors and organizations. Very, very important. The key to establishing value and then quantifying the value to indicate when and how those values can be demonstrated to have been achieved is very, very important. And so it goes around. I really want to say something about vision. And some of us are in organizations that doesn't have the privilege and the time to do this. In my 25 years at this organization that I work for, I have seen this actually go round. Matured organizations, and here I may say nations that are on continuous improvement and sustained development paths, like the Tanzania Vision 2050, if I'm correct. Did I get that right? I took a crash course on it last night. Believe me, we can actually get to a point where we can allow measurable outcomes based on how they are playing out to shape our vision. And that's okay. That's okay. Don't scream at leadership. What happened? We were going this way. Something happened. We are picking up outcomes from the programs that were based on the strategy, and now we realize, based on uncertainties, geopolitics, the demographics of our workforce, whatever happens to be, we have to be real. Life is real. We cannot live in the world of data. And by the way, I'll touch on data analytics. We don't make decisions based on data analytics. Data analytics are simply leveraged together with other important variables in making decisions. But then these measurable outcomes, if they are not really panning out in terms of the established institutional direction, it's okay to allow that to shape vision. So show some grace when you see leadership calling into a meeting and saying, we need to tweak this a little bit. Believe me, this is classic. Successful missions are run on this. All right, I'll proceed. Let me give you an example of a measurable strategy. On May 25, 1961, U.S. President John F. Kennedy stated in a speech he delivered to the U.S. Congress, quote, "I believe that this nation, before this decade is out, of landing a man," of course he meant a man at that time, "on the moon and returning him safely to the earth," end of quote. This is a classic cited often to illustrate the concept of measurable strategy or a goal statement. And this is how I often interpret this let me finish this and I'll move on. This is how I often interpret this to my NASA workforce. In other words, Kennedy is saying the goal is to land a man, not a chimpanzee, and not a robot. By the way, this is so succinct, so precise. Scholars and academics have actually wondered if Kennedy himself wrote this or if somebody with an expertise did this. And then he said on the moon, so here it's very clear, not on planet Mars and not on Venus. He said on the moon. And of course not in the Pacific Ocean. And then he said, return him. So I interpret this for my workforce at NASA. He told them, give them a two-way ticket. Don't leave the astronauts. Don't leave them on the surface of the moon. A two-way ticket, a return ticket. Fascinating. And then he added something that the engineers in the room will recognize very quickly. He said, return them safely. So here we have safety and mission assurance coming into play. We talk about this in systems engineering as the ELITES. And so Kennedy, a politician, gave this succinct, precise, strategic statement to the U.S. Congress that NASA took to put a man on the moon and bring him back. I cited this example as an idea of how to get strategic goals well stated. By the way, Kennedy left something out. Who will remind me of that? He left something out of what I just quoted. Is there a way that you can remind me of that? Do we have program and project managers in the room, in the house? He left something out. He said, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out, landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. He ignores something very important. What is that? We talk about it as the triple constraint. So you have scope, schedule. What is the third one? Cost. Kennedy did not include cost. And so today, when we are writing measurable strategic statements, we would have included cost. Kennedy was intentional with this move. There was a race, sort of competition with the Soviet Union of those days. And so to the United States, money was not an issue. And when you study the history of the Apollo program that successfully landed humans on lunar surface, various Apollo missions, Apollo 12, Apollo this, all the way through 7, all of that, money was not an issue. And so, yeah, there are times when strategic statements can come out like that. In these days, if you ask me, I'll put on my professorial kind of hat and tell you, no, don't do that. Include cost. Include cost. All right. Stakeholder expectations is very, very important. Let us take a closer look at how organizational strategy should drive performance improvement through the use of appropriate and relevant technology in support, some may say in support of decision making. I touched on this briefly earlier. Effective decision making is a function of both independent and dependent variables. What do I mean by that? When you talk about making effective decisions, you will have this independent element that goes into it. That may be the expert. The dependent variables include uncertainties, rightly so. Market forces, market dynamics, geopolitics, the unknown, a lot. And so when you're making effective decisions, you really don't have all the data. You don't have the information you need. You don't have all your VIC spell out. Yet you are required as CEO, as board members, as head of the board, as a minister to make the hard call. It is really a very challenging, and you will still do that with an idea of effective risk management, having tools and being proactive in capturing all the uncertainties, all the assumptions supporting your decision making, and being very active because they will play out. You have imperfect data. There's nothing like perfect data. Forget about what artificial intelligence is trying to tell you. And some of our friends in Silicon Valley, what they are trying to project, that technology will improve your life. It has limits. If there was time, I'll really get into more specific. Technology in the decision-making process is simply intended to help with the analysis of relevant and what I call curated data and information, not knowledge. Underline that. Knowledge is not information. Knowledge is not data. Knowledge is what you need to make effective decisions. Data analytics, analyzing data gives you insights, trends, right? And then you have other very important set of variables. And I always caution my staff, don't be so quick pointing fingers at leadership. There are a lot of these variables that often come in through where they sit, and you will not see it. And so you'll be whining and complaining. We agree on this, what the data is telling us. Yet the director, the CEO went off and made the decision this way. Sometimes the variables that they had outweighed the data analytics. It's not always about data. I'm coming from a technical organization and I have to say this. It's not always about the data. The outcomes of technology-derived insights should be channeled into higher levels of analysis involving other critical strategic drivers. Do not base strategic decisions exclusively on data analytics. I have nothing against data analytics. I just want you to use them the right way. I do take this question a lot from leaders, from practitioners, from researchers, from students. These days, data analytics is everything, and you see very important decisions being made simply based on data. And then I'll say, not so fast. The role of data, I actually prefer to put it this way, the role of data. Data informed. The data is simply informing the decision making. The data has to inform, the data has to influence the direction we are going. But other critical factors have to be considered. This is the inside scoop for leadership. Don't blame leaders. I've already touched on this. Don't blame leaders. You will be surprised. You will make the same call if you were presented with the same set of independent and dependent variables for your decision-making process. And so before you are quick pointing fingers at leaders and saying why they didn't depend exclusively on the data and how you guided them, and now on the fly they have changed. Decisions should not be based exclusively on data analytics or technology-derived insights. Let me transition to technology adoption. Any technology or technologies of interest should be carefully studied before acquisition and subsequent adoption. All forms of technologies and their tools They have limitations, they have benefits, and these attributes have associated costs. Don't take it for granted. Don't just listen to that message. Oh yeah, technology will solve all problems. Yeah, good luck. At times, maintaining technology that has been integrated into operations can be very expensive. Most importantly, technology should be considered before its acquisition and adoption within the broader range of various solution sets. Do you actually need that technology? Technology alone will not drive successful decision-making, period, or enhance performance. It is one input into that tool set, that function, for enhanced performance. What is critical is actually your ability to optimize various sets of tools, including the technology, various mechanisms, expertise, and effective risk management to increase the likelihood of your decisions coming through on the positive side and enhancing performance. The emphasis is on optimization, just as we do in engineering. If I have more time, I'll touch on this for human systems. How do we go about making optimized decisions to ensure resilience? I'll fly through this for now. The technology of choice should be based on key strategic areas necessary for success. I'm going very slow on the technology adoption piece. In other words, institutional strategy is what should actually drive technology selection. I've seen areas where the technology is selected and then strategy is being forced to dance to it. Who can identify with that? That's backwards. That's backwards. I love technology, as you can see. I've been playing with it. I can play with it 24/7. But believe me, I also know what technology can do and what technology cannot do. I also do know when you're talking about lives, development, people, sustainability, longevity, decision-making, complex human arrangements, institutions, you have so much that should make it into the mix before you make that decision. It is your ability to optimize. In other words, the institutional strategy should drive the technology selection, or the technology of interest, as I prefer to put it. The technology of interest because you have other options. Do not just say yes to the first vendor that walked through your door, or who is a colleague of yours from Harvard University. Don't just say yes to it. You have options. And by the way, technology must have flexibility built into it. Why? Because when we are talking about strategy, it's a broad framework, and uncertainties will happen. I mentioned the universe of unknowns. When you are in leadership, believe me, you know this. There's so many things that will be thrown at you. And so the technology has to have that flexibility. I've seen pieces of technology applications where it's so rigid, you can't even get it to do something slightly different than what you want to do. At that point, the technology is getting in the way. It's not actually enabling performance. It's actually getting in the way. Every strategy has unknowns and uncertainties. That's standard. And so as stakeholders, you need to factor in the flexibility quotient into the decision-making mix regarding technology of choice or the technology of interest. I would like to highlight a few proven effective principles on leadership. And I'm getting science. I think I'll be wrapping this up very quickly. Leadership is about your ability to provide what is needed to guide a team. I take out all the fluff that you get from the Harvard Business Leadership Schools and all the various think tanks on leadership. The way I see leadership is being able to provide guidance to a team, a project, an enterprise, a nation to succeed. And then here comes the punchline, to navigate uncertainty. So when you have a leader who got thrusted onto the scene of leadership and was able to manage an enterprise, a nation, through uncertainty, my goodness, that's successful leadership. That's successful leadership. And you do not want to downplay that. We've got missions, to give you a clear example. We've had missions that get in trouble. And the existing leader, project leader, cannot get that mission out of that challenge. or something happens to that leader and somebody else who had nothing to do at all about that leadership role gets in and takes the mission to a successful end. That's leadership that needs to be celebrated. So for me, leadership, one's ability to guide a team, lead a team, influence a team, to navigate uncertainty, that's leadership. At NASA, all our missions, whether putting a rover on planet Mars, or sending astronauts to the International Space Station, or landing OSIRIS-X, which is a satellite, on an asteroid called Bennu. This was done from my base, and collecting samples and bringing it back for analysis. And by the way, we have analyzed this sample. Whether we do all of this, these missions are led by women and men. Oh yes, emphasis, by women and men of service and dedication, except we call them leaders. So I have learned a few things about effective leadership. In other words, leadership that leads to mission success. Leadership for various groups of people, missions. Sometimes you have a group of people with conflicting interests or conflicting set of requirements. I've also learned a few things about leadership for projects dispersed around the world. And by the way, it's not easy to lead very intelligent, brilliant, hard-working, passionate men and women. It's not easy. So I've learned a few things. On the broader subject of leadership, I will submit that the narrow band definition of leadership, often dominated by Western schools of thought, should be balanced by what we know and practice in other regions of the world, including right here in Tanzania. Did you catch that? You can find effective leaders in government. You can find effective leaders in our villages. You can find effective leaders on boards in private industry. You can find them everywhere. So Africa is not in a crisis, leadership crisis, as often we tend to hear. We have tools, you have tools and knowledge to innovate new leadership construct for progress for your respective disciplines, I'll put out there. On this note, I would like to submit that Africans and Tanzanians in particular have to institutionalize, and this is great to say this because we are in this edifice, we have to institutionalize sound leadership principles of our leaders. Very, very important. As I travel across African capitals, I don't see this going on. It's not that expensive to do. And we have great leaders working among our mates, and nobody's harvesting the approach to even teach the up and coming. It's very, very important we don't lose their idea, their inspiration. So as a member of this forum, I will encourage all of you to bring your unique perspectives to the discussion. Allow your insights to shape the discussion and subsequent actions. Leadership is about providing vision and something I call strategic nurturing. There are instances where you'll be leading. The strategy is already in place, and you just have to nurture. How do you do that? Leadership is about one's ability to facilitate agile processes. Leadership, in essence, is about people. It's about employees. It's about stakeholders. It's about communities. Leadership is about real people. It's about lives. Leadership, therefore, is about service and not lordship. Leadership is about humility and not arrogance. And by the way, arrogance can show up in leadership circles in different ways. Leadership is all about people and not some wild, abstract construct with no regard for people. People are real, and so to lead, you have to be real and grounded in reality. Even within the disciplines of space science and exploration, where some will joke and say we are looking for aliens, we have conclusively established that mission success is made possible by people for humanity. Let me state for the record that true leadership is needed in our world today. There are leadership vacuums in businesses, in communities, in government, and this last point, even in our families, if we are to be honest. Ironically, we are a generation with numerous books on leadership, what I call zillions of leadership podcasts, and hundreds of executive dogmas being propagated around the world by Ivy League schools. Why? Because leadership is critical for every human enterprise. If you have a role, to influence a project or an activity, you are a leader. Leadership is critical. whether in a stressful situation such as making the decision to launch a $1 billion spacecraft with humans on a rocket, or whether deciding to roll out a new product in an African village, it is still leadership. And to succeed in either of these examples, you still need the same set of leadership thinking, people-focused, ethical, and moral character. Friends, let me remind you that on the journey of leadership, you need to be creative and innovative, particularly in uncertain times. And so learn to demonstrate respect for all, and I like this point, irrespective of rank on the organization chart. There's a lot of studies of late coming out to back this statement that enterprises around the world that are doing well, that are relatively stable in these uncertain times, are being led by CEOs and individuals that are what we call down to earth. They respect everyone, irrespective of your rank on the org chart. So demonstrate respect for all, irrespective of rank, and I'll move very quickly. Let me jump. I'll skip a few things and then get to... There is something else I want to touch on this because it's real. There is this word called, in leadership, being vulnerable. And there is a misconception that being vulnerable means you are weak. Being vulnerable is actually an active ingredient for allowing the humanity in you to show as a leader. And the benefits are tremendous. A careful study of organizational cultures around the world indicate that projects and organizations with leaders who are human beings first are the ones doing very well in uncertain times. And this vulnerability is actually a function, we do know, of humility. I'll skip a few things for the sake of time and then get straight to something so that we can chat. Some pictures later on, you can check these out. So a reflection on my leadership journey reminds me of 3 leadership lessons, and I'm coming to a close very quickly. 3 leadership, what I call 3 leadership thrust areas that have helped me along the way and continue to serve me. And so I want to kind of share them with you briefly, point them out for your consideration. I call this leadership thrust number 1. And this, I've entitled this the community of understanding. I have learned that to pursue understanding by asking questions is a positive thing. Questions inform a genuine sense of curiosity. That is a desire to understand. And I've learned to explore in order to understand. And you will say, oh yeah, you're from NASA, exploration, to understand. But I've also learned that it's important to establish relationships in order to understand. It's very difficult to understand, for others to understand you, if there is no community. Better still, I have learned to build a community of understanding, because it is impossible to do it alone as a leader. As a director, as a leader, you need a community that understands the mission, including its challenges and opportunities. Leadership thrust number 2. I capture this thrust as failure. A leader needs to know how to welcome failure. I have learned that failure is not a bad thing, just as success. It's not all the time good. What is he saying? We can talk more about this during lunch. Your failure is an opportunity to discover new insights and new techniques. Failure is the raw material for building resilience into your personality and that of your organization. In fact, we have studied technical failures for decades and have concluded that failure provides what we call learning organizations. That means organizations that are willing to learn. Failure provides them the tools to build resilience into their systems. You see, the challenge with success is that sometimes you don't even pause, you don't stop to analyze what made you successful in the first place. This is real. Even at NASA, we've seen this. Failure, on the other hand, allows you to check everything and learn what you need to do to improve and succeed. Leadership number 3. Always look forward to the future with a sense of anticipation as a surviving and thriving force. Despite the noise and problems in your ecosystem, always look forward with a sense of anticipation. Celebrate the future. In fact, I have learned not to fear at all. Did you catch that? I've learned that fear is not actually real. I have learned that there's a role for the human emotion we call fear. And you have to learn not how to manage fear. Go to the next level, how to outmaster fear. As a leader, don't allow fear to control or drive your decisions. Don't only manage fear, master fear, outmaster fear. Whether the source of that fear is institutional, is it government, is it politics, is it marketplace dynamics, is it geopolitics, what is it? Learn to outsmart your fear. I am often asked to comment on what drives me. The following quote from my namesake, a person by name Moses Luzzatto, it goes with the first name only, in 1735, says something that is so fundamental to how I approach challenges and opportunities. Luzzatto pointed out, quote, when people know a number of things, and one of them understands how the things are systematically categorized and related, that person has an advantage over the others who don't have the same understanding, end of quote. This is very fundamental to how the world runs today. This famous statement is pointing to the need to understand how the system goes around. In other words, systems thinking. Don't be so narrow, so siloed from your vantage point. It's not all about you. So begin to have that framework for systems thinking. Friends, the future is for leaders and individuals who can build teams, who know how to leverage failure. Most importantly, how to outmaster fear, chaos, and uncertainty. As someone who has supported space science and exploration for over 25 years, I have learned that the future is for those with the psychological mindset to handle chaos, change, and the unknown. Because what often appears as chaos in the distant future are the same elements that become the welcoming lights to new horizons, new stars, and new constellations through the passage of time and sustained by persistent curiosity. And so as leaders, my charge to all of you is that be encouraged, be motivated, and press on. Ignore the noise. Focus on the target of interest through your strategies and your implemented programs. As I look across the auditorium and from this morning, I pick out leaders, CEOs, board directors, leaders in government, practitioners who are uniquely positioned to lead and influence the development trajectory of this great country, the United Republic of Tanzania, and in fact, by extension, the continent of Africa. On this note, allow me to appeal to your sense of leadership, pride, as directors, as CEOs, not to leave the development of Tanzania in Africa to others. Please do not do that. You were born a Tanzanian for a special reason and an African for a greater purpose. Find your purpose within your current leadership circles of influence. Know your leadership station of calling and apply yourself. Manage projects. Lead your organizations with a sense of transformative urgency. Lead your teams and organizations with renewed emphasis on effective strategies, tactics, and actions for measurable outcomes. Repeat and sustain what is working and bring in results. Discontinue what is not working. Celebrate excellence. Reward brilliance and hard work and good people. Friends, the progress march of the human project that we started from our own Serengeti plains, and today we've advanced to a space civilization, artificial intelligence, quantum-derived capabilities, has always looked beyond adversity and challenge, and our generation will not be different. So let's work together to architect, activate, and usher in a new dawn of progress and development across Tanzania. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's have another round of applause for Dr. Adoko. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the thrusts of leadership that you have given to us, but also reminding us the vast amount of talent we have in our continent, but also in our country, encourage us on how to harness them. But we also enjoyed the cosmic visuals which you also presented as part of your presentation. So now, without wasting time, we are going to our next presentation, which is going to be delivered by Ambassador Tobias Masandiko Makoba, who is currently the Director of Global Strategies and Geopolitics at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and East Africa Cooperation of the United Republic of Tanzania. Before this role, Ambassador Makoba was the Director of Information Services and Government's Chief Spokesperson of the United Republic of Tanzania. He has a master's degree in security and strategic studies from the National Defense College, a postgraduate diploma in economic diplomacy from Salim Ahmed Salim CFR Center for Foreign Relations, and a bachelor degree from the University of Dar es Salaam. So, as we see in the program, he's going to take us through the journey of trying to solve a puzzle titled Minority Interest, the overarching geopolitics, a catalyst or an inhibitor. Ambassador Makoba, allow me just to take 10 minutes from your 50 minutes, which was on your plan. So you have 40 minutes to give the presentation so that we have the time now to go for our lunch break. Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for him as he comes to the podium. Karibu sana Balozi.
Good afternoon.